welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Christina Caesar, and I manage marketing and communications at Synergy Technical, and I will be moderating today's session. Today's webinar is the first in our new series on Microsoft's latest product release on Windows 365. This session will provide a high-level overview of what the solution is, how it works, as well as how it fits into Microsoft's desktop management strategy. Just a reminder, today's session is being recorded, and please make sure to send any questions through the Q&A function within Teams. So just a little bit about us. Synergy Technical is an IT consulting firm headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. We have clients in over 70 countries and all 50 states, and manage over 2 million licenses of Microsoft 365 for our clients through our licensing and managed services practice. In February 2020, we were awarded the Microsoft 365 Security Deployment Partner of the Year award. So always a mouthful. A large part of that success is the work done by one of today's presenters, Adrian Amos. So Adrian is one of our best sales engineers and solution architects who has deep level experience in the Microsoft suite, both productivity and security, and who's had the honor of running customer immersion experience workshops at Microsoft Ignite for several years. I also have the pleasure of introducing David Branscome, an experienced Microsoft Cloud Solutions architect who specializes in design, deployment, and management of complex Microsoft on-premises and cloud environments. David has a long history with Synergy Technical and has been a huge asset to our team as we've grown in the Microsoft community. With that, I think, I know we have a lot to cover today, so we're ready to kick it off. I can hand it over to Adrian. Whenever you're ready to get started, we can kick this thing off.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Christina. I always appreciate the kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen. If you wouldn't mind letting me know when you are able to see it. Thank you so much. Are you seeing it?
I'm seeing it, yes. I'm switching you over so that we got screen in your camera. And
what we are looking at is a Windows 365 desktop, and it's pretty exciting stuff, right? We're running a full featured Windows PC in the cloud. It's not an Azure virtual desktop. This is a new offering, right? Everybody was kind of waiting with bated breath to see this go live on August 2. But this is it, right? What we have here is a number of users replicated from, or not replicated from, but in Azure Active Directory and also in Active Directory on premises that are able to access cloud PCs virtually from anywhere, from any device. They can come into it through a traditional remote desktop environment, or they can access it directly in the web, or they can access it from a mobile device, however it is that we want to get to it. So what I thought I would do is just kind of first show you that it is really actually a full PC. It's not like a slightly windowed version of a thing where we have a few apps that we can do. It's not like we're streaming applications, right? This is a real, actual, full, persistent PC, all the way down to and including the ability to run multiple desktops within this PC. So, as this user, I can decide that I want to switch back and forth between my personal workloads, maybe, Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of fun stuff over here, and I can switch back very easily to my business workloads in full, isolated, separate desktops. And you can see right up here, this is not one of the screamingest, top of the line, biggest possible sizes that's out there. This is a fairly normal size PC, regular kind of consumption and moderate production PC for what I would consider to be like an office user. So right off the bat, you can see that, like I said, I've got all my my Windows stuff right here. I've got all my core applications. And I don't have to deploy these, right? There are pre-configured system images in the gallery that have the optimizations already created to run the Office 365 or the Microsoft 365 workloads natively inside this device. So my deployment for this was just assign it to a user. That was it. So right off the bat, my user can come in here, he can browse his email, he can fire up other applications, he can open up the company portal app, because 100% of the management for this is actually the exact same stuff that we've been preaching for the last 2, 3, 4 years about do it all in Intune, right? Standardize that surface so that when users want new applications, they can come in here and self-deploy an application, right? So my guy can come over here and he can say he really wants to have Power BI. This is actually a published application that we have in our Intune portal. He hits install, he can go on about his day while that's installing, right? Otherwise, he's got the same applications. He can see all of his Office home experience. He's automatically, and I didn't set any of this up, like usually I would have to go through and actually create an Intune policy or profile that would cause OneDrive to automatically log in. Didn't have to do that. All of that stuff just started natively working the second that my user logged in. And incidentally, all my other management stuff from the Microsoft 365 space came in as well, including my ability to have all of my sensitivity labels natively just work into this environment. And when it comes time to actually do something crazy like print this thing, because yeah, users still do that, we can come in through here, and again, we're pulling up all of our capabilities that exist with our universal print, right? I've got all my universal print devices here. Here's the RVA big printer right here. If I wanted to add a printer, it's going to take me into the ability to dig through my universal print queues to see what's published out here. And that's really nice because as my users travel around, maybe they traditionally are printing to the RVA printer, but they're out of town. I want to make sure that my users can search for printers that exist near where they are. I've got a guy who's in New York City today. He's on the 8th floor. He needs to go actually to the resource room. He needs to see what printers are there. All that's going to come up natively because it's all integrated with the Microsoft 365 experience, right? So all of this is super duper useful. It's super easy. He's decided, though, that it's time for him to get off of the computer that he's on right now. And you can see we were accessing that through the native remote desktop tool. And it's time for him to actually go into the office, right? So we still have to give our users a physical device of some sort. Maybe it's a device they already own, a personally owned PC, a really low-powered web browsing only computer that we send them along with. But our user logs in for the first time ever just to office.com. And maybe we want to make sure that they have a different experience on a personally owned device versus a corporate owned device. And one of the things I've shown for years is the ability to say that like personally owned devices can't access particular workloads in the Office 365 space. So we're using a conditional access policy to say that you can't get into, say, Yammer with a personally owned device. Okay, so what we're doing right here, we've got this nice little, you can't access this right now, but if I come back over into my Office 365 apps and I look at my all apps and I explore all my apps, right? Now I'm going to be able to see this Windows 365 showing up right down here as one of the apps that's available to me as the user. And incidentally, you can pin this up for users. I just haven't gotten to that part in my environment yet. They then open it up on a web browser. Okay, now this is what most users are going to see. If they go to windows365.microsoft.com as their first login experience, this is what they're generally going to see. Incidentally, I do have a user who's never gone through this process before, and let me find his session. Believe it is, yes, here we go. I got David Purley here. Famous Formula One driver from the mid-70s, but this is the first time he has ever come to this page. And what it's telling him is that I've got a machine that's deployed, it's ready for him. Hey, this is a new thing, go next. What is a cloud PC? A little quick description, what can I do with it? It's ready, get started. Now you're gonna see it looks exactly like what my other user has. So my other user, he's been in here for a little bit. He's got some options with his cloud PC. He can restart it, rename it, troubleshoot it, open it in the browser, or he can get a quick link to all of the different app stores and the remote desktop clients that exist for these. This is not mstsc.exe. This is remote desktop. So it's a little bit different. But once we get it, we're going to actually have a subscription URL that we put into this. So if we deploy multiple images to our users, they'll be able to look through and pick the right image for them. But for the most part, they're going to come in here. They're going to hit open in browser. It's going to prompt them whether or not they want to redirect some local resources, which we can always do. We can always choose not to do. Here we go. I don't want to take the microphone and I don't want to take the printer in, but I'll allow the other things to go in. It's going to then tell me what size machine it's launching for me, open the port, and it's going to ask me to authenticate. And if I type that correctly, which you never know with me, it should put me right back into the exact same experience. It's going to take a second. There we go. We're right back to the session that we were in just a little bit ago. We're running a Windows computer inside of a web browser now, accessing all of our same workloads and everything. And incidentally, I don't have that same restriction trying to get to Yammer here, right? Because my conditional access policy says I only can't get to Yammer from a personal device. Well, this physical asset in my hand here is a personal device, but this remote Cloud PC, this Windows 365 environment, is a corporate managed hybrid Azure AD joined device that's able to consume all of the policies for my demo tenant. So we got all that going, right? The last kind of thing that we probably want to do here is show you that it really is pretty much from any device. I want to get to it from any time. So I'm going to grab my phone here and I'm going to show you that I've got all my little work apps right here, and going to go into, actually, let me stop sharing my screen so you can see this a little better. Let me see. All right, there we go. So here's my phone. Here's my sessions of all my little browsery bits and all my computers that I can connect to. And I'm going to click to join that guy. It's telling me it's connecting to it. And then it's going to ask me to authenticate again. I'm a little slower on this one than I am on my computer, partially because I refuse to admit that I need reading glasses. All right, and here we go. Here's my Yammer post that I was just looking at, and I'm on this full-featured Windows computer, and if I turn it sideways, yes, it will automatically resize for me, and you can see that I have the full experience that I had before. Navigating around is a little bit different because your finger acts as the mouse, so the whole screen kind of operates as a trackpad. So you might start in the middle and then scroll over to the side to pick up the little Windows Start button. It's just a little bit of an uptick in a learning curve, but it's a full, it's the full Windows PC. And when I'm done in here, I can simply drop out of it. It'll take me back to a list of all the cloud PCs that are available to me. I can decide I just want to close that, and I'm done. I'm back to exactly where I was just a minute ago. So that's kind of like the 50,000 foot overview, right? We've talked a little bit about what it is. We've talked a little bit about how we manage it, how we can see the same experience on multiple different methods of access. But I want to let David Branscome now speak from the Microsoft perspective a little bit about how this fits into the whole desktop portfolio. So, David.
All right. Thanks, Adrian. That's a great demo. I really enjoyed it. So we've kind of beaten this horse to death, as far as the pandemic and all this, the way it's changed work. But one thing I did want to point out here is that just before this webinar started, I was reading some news on my phone, and one of the things that it was talking about is what they're calling the Great Resignation that's taking place in the United States, and what they were describing was over the last from April, May, and June, 11.5 million people quit their jobs. Okay, 11.5 million people quit their jobs, and they asked a sampling of people, I think it was like 30,000 people, how they felt about their jobs. And they said that 40% of the people were looking for another job or were considering quitting their jobs. Now that's kind of interesting because they wanted to figure out why. Why is that the case? And what you see here on the slide is directly related to their answers. Over the past year and a half or more, we've seen people working from home. We've seen people getting their jobs done, even though they don't come into the office. And they're saying people are demanding that type of condition to exist and to persist post-pandemic. So the numbers that you see here, 73% of workers say they want flexible remote work options. That is employees demanding flexibility with work, right? It's no longer an option or a perk. It's what people are expecting to happen. And so that's where the flexibility with being able to provide desktop access in a secure manner with the applications that your end users need, that's where this comes into play. And Christina, can you move forward to the next slide?
Yep.
So it's something that we really have to think about, and so the shift to the hybrid work situation where some people are working from home, some people are working at the office, you have a little bit more flexibility there. This creates new opportunities, but it also creates some challenges as well. So things look different when new employees are being onboarded and they're not physically in the office. Microsoft saw this themselves very early on in the pandemic. I think we went on lockdown in March of last year, and we were onboarding thousands of people, right, bringing them into the company, but so were lots of other people, and they were trying to very quickly get laptops into the hands of people that were working remotely, and that created a shortage of laptops. People couldn't get laptops. And so what Microsoft started doing was provisioning virtual desktops to their new employees. We said, until we can get you a physical laptop, this is what we want you working off of. And so that model is carrying forward now. That model is becoming what we expect many businesses will follow, allowing people to use whatever laptop or operating system they choose. If they want to work off their iPad and use their personal iPad, that's fine. Adrian showed you how that would work on an Android device. The same thing could work on an iPad. The same thing could work on your personal PC. So it's not necessary in every case to provide a physical device to an end user. Now, there's benefits to that, of course, but it gives you the flexibility of either providing that physical device or providing this virtual, secure, containerized, not containerized, but secure virtual desktop. So what this gives us is the flexibility for, as the slide points out, onboarding and provisioning. It also gives us the ability to take advantage of changes in the business world, and being able to quickly provision machines for our end users, scaling up, scaling down very quickly without taking on a large amount of capital expense. And it also allows you to secure those devices. Adrian mentioned that these devices are being secured with Intune and Microsoft Endpoint Manager. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Let's move forward to the next slide, please. And so, as a way of providing this type of flexibility to our end users, Microsoft is introducing Windows 365. And that's the Cloud PC that Adrian was demonstrating for you. Windows has been at the heart of what Microsoft has built for decades. It's one of the most fundamental and most innovative platforms for work, for learning, for creativity, for fun, for development. People know and understand how to use Windows. And so we're providing additional capabilities with the Cloud PC. Let's move forward. And so just like we brought Office to the cloud about 10 years ago with Office 365, we're now delivering Windows as a service with Windows 365. So now Windows is no longer a device-based operating system, but it's become a hybrid computing platform. So when we say hybrid computing platform, it means that this operating system can run on any platform. It can run on Windows, on a Windows machine, but it can also run on an Android phone. It can run on an iPhone. It can run on an iPad. It can run on a Mac OS. It's very flexible and provides you with the same good experience that you would have if you had a physical laptop in front of you. Let's go to the next slide. So Adrian kind of touched on this a little bit, but it bears calling out again. With a Windows 365 subscription, it is not necessary for a smaller organization to have a fully staffed IT department. You don't need experience with virtualization. And as we start talking about the differences between Windows 365 and Cloud VDI and Azure Virtual Desktop, you'll start to understand how they're different. And I can understand how that would be a little confusing. But with Windows 365, your users will have access to their own personalized Windows desktop that is being securely streamed from the Microsoft Cloud to any device that they choose, right? It meets their business needs, most notably the desire to work in a hybrid scenario, being able to work from home or from the office, but it also unlocks new scenarios, new opportunities, while keeping the business running, even though the environment outside of the business is constantly changing. This gives your IT team the opportunity to leverage the freedom from managing desktops and doing break fix sort of things with desktops to working on more interesting projects or projects that can move the business forward and help you to become more productive. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so there are a lot of choices, and maybe you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm confused. So if we look at the slide here, if we start in the lower, it would be your lower left corner. You've got the PC, your standard PC. This is what people have been using for years. It's a laptop or a desktop, might be managed entirely by your IT organization. They will deploy applications to it. Maybe they'll deploy an image with applications on top of it. They manage broken hardware if the screen stops working, or if you break a keyboard. They manage the refresh cycle. All those things, that's the responsibility of the organization itself. Now, if you move over to the right-hand side, you have your on-premises virtual desktop infrastructure. So for many organizations, that might be infrastructure that's running on VMware, on Hyper-V. So that improved on the previous model by allowing the IT organization to provision virtual desktops to their end users. The problem that many organizations encountered was that, number one, this required a virtualization infrastructure on premises, which tended to be fairly expensive. And secondly, the IT organization had to secure and manage those virtual desktops. So that added a lot of overhead to the provisioning of these desktops. So that leaves the two cloud options that are kind of in the middle there. We've got your Cloud PC on the left, and you've got your Cloud VDI or Azure Virtual Desktop on the right. So let's move forward one slide and we'll take a look at each of those and see how they differ. All right, so if you're thinking about or trying to decide between the Cloud PC and the Cloud VDI model, the first part of the decision-making process is determining which overall technology is going to work best for you. There's a couple things to think about. First, management of the service itself is one big difference. If you're using Windows 365, the Cloud PC, Microsoft is managing the service end to end. The back-end infrastructure is completely managed by Microsoft. With Azure Virtual Desktop, the customer is responsible for defining what a virtual machine looks like. They set up the networking, excuse me, and do the securing. So if you don't have a lot of experience with Azure virtualization, then Windows 365 can help you get started very quickly. A little tickle here. In fact, if you're using the Windows Business SKU, the Windows 365 Business SKU, you can actually be up and running with a Windows 365 machine in literally minutes. It'll take a little bit longer if you're setting up Windows 365 Enterprise, and I'll talk about the difference there in a minute, because there's more management capabilities to configure, but we'll talk about that, as I said, in an upcoming slide. Now, Now on the right-hand side, we've got Azure Virtual Desktop. Now with Azure Virtual Desktop, you can do multi-session desktops. In other words, a single virtual machine can provide desktop capabilities to multiple people from a single resource. So that isn't the case with Windows 365. It's one PC for one user with Windows 365. With Azure Virtual Desktop, one machine can provide multiple sessions to multiple people. The third big difference is cost management. So with Windows 365, you're being charged a monthly per user price, and that stays consistent. So if you're concerned about keeping a consistent price throughout the year, you don't want that to fluctuate, then Windows 365 is the machine that you want to provision. With Azure Virtual Desktops, it's a consumption-based pricing model. So your costs can vary from month to month according to the usage and which machines are provisioned and so forth. So there's a cost management benefit with Windows 365 as well. And let's go to the next slide just to talk about one other key point, Christina. So we've got the two main options on the left and the middle here. We've got Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. And then there's the one, you might call it an outlier. So that's Azure Virtual Desktop running Citrix or VMware for VDI. So that scenario is, again, useful in situations where a customer may already be invested in a virtual desktop infrastructure. They may already have invested in Citrix or VMware. So this scenario, Azure Virtual Desktop with Citrix and VMware, would allow them to perhaps span multiple clouds with their virtual desktop infrastructure, even span between on-premise and the cloud. So that's the use case for that. So the key that I'm getting at here is there's a lot of flexibility. You just have to think about what is the scenario and the problem that I'm trying to solve. Let's go to the next slide, please. And this is the one where we're going to talk about the different editions of Windows 365. So I mentioned there's a business edition and there's an enterprise edition. So which is the right one? The big difference here is the management capabilities that are afforded with each solution. When you buy Windows 365 Business, just like if you think about Microsoft 365 Business or Office 365 Business, it's ideal for smaller customers and under 300 seats. Now you can literally purchase and deploy Windows 365 Business desktops directly from the Windows365.com website. So it's ideal for SMB customers who don't already have a footprint in Azure. There are no licensing prerequisites. You just provision the desktops and you pay for how many that you're using, right? The management capabilities, on the other hand, are fairly limited. So you want to keep that in mind. On the right-hand side, however, you've got Windows 365 Enterprise. So this you can deploy to any number of users. There's no cap on how many users you can deploy this to. There are licensing prerequisites for deployment in this case. You need Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you need Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1, and the organization needs to be licensed for either Windows 10 or Windows 11 when that's available. And they'll also need an Azure subscription. So those are the ways that you can make a decision between these two editions, which one is the right one for your specific needs. Now, if we go to the next slide, these are the specific features that are broken out by the different editions. So if you look at the Windows 365 Business, you see the four features up at the top are the ones that are characteristics of Windows 365, and then the remainder of those are not available in the Windows 365 Business SKU. On the right-hand side, though, you see that there's a significant amount of capability built into Windows 365 Enterprise, including, as was alluded to earlier, the ability to manage with Endpoint Manager. You can create your own custom images. You can do self-serve upgrades. You get service health, operational alerts, all those types of things, as well as being able to connect to on-premises resources. So again, think about the use case that you're trying to solve for. Try to figure out what problems your users are facing, and that will help you to make the decision here on the different editions that you had to choose from. Let's go to our last slide. So when Adrian showed you the virtual desktop that he had provisioned for his test user, he showed you the sizing of that machine. He showed you that it had, I think it was 4 CPUs and 8 gig of RAM, or sort of 4 gig of RAM, something like that. There's a variety of different form factors for the Windows 365 business desktops. So those are listed here. And there's going to be more that come out over time as the different hardware vendors match up with what we have deployed in Azure. But this will give you an idea of the range of sizes that you can deploy your Windows 365 virtual desktop using. So you can have some that are very high compute, maybe some that have a lot of memory, some that have a decent amount of local storage. Just depends on the use case that you're trying to solve for with the desktop. Now, one of the things that I've mentioned a couple times is management and making this thing work. So I'm going to turn it back over to Adrian, and he can talk a little bit more about how you make this all go.
Adrian, whenever you're ready, take over the screen. We will switch over. David, that was awesome. I know there's a couple questions that we have in the Q&A that we will cover at the end of the webinar. I know he's covered some of them shortly, but Adrian, we will.
Sorry, had a technical challenge.
Yeah, you're good.
No. I appreciate the stall. Yeah, so actually I've been watching the Q&A, and you guys are asking a lot of great questions, and I really appreciate that. And I am going to steal the screen back here, and we will cover some of this content actually pretty directly. So let me grab my screen here. So yes, the questions did come up about the size of the machine, and we're talking about just a little bit about how to administer it, right? Because we're going to talk a lot about that next month. We're actually going to cover a lot deeper details on administering Windows 365, securing it, provisioning it, all that kind of fun stuff. But we're also going to talk about how that fits into an environment that also has other desktop enablement tools like AVD and other things going on too. So, all right, just a really quick overview. The question did come up about sizing limits and sizes of machines and everything, and David showed a great slide that showed the families. When you go to purchase licenses in the enterprise side, you will actually be presented with a list of plans and pricing, right? I will tell you, my machines, I think, are running right here and right here. They're not big machines, and they're working fine to do desktop type work. I did see a question about GPU support, and Microsoft has heard that, and I have heard that is planned to be coming, but it's not there right now. But because this is one machine to one user, you're not going to see the same challenges that you saw with over-provisioned host pools with AVD, right? Where 3 users get into an environment and they all start trying to play a YouTube video, and because there's no GPU, processor goes to 100% on all 3 machines on the host, and all 3 machines suffer. You're not going to see that kind of performance in this space, but there is a real viable need for GPU support. So we have heard it is coming. Now, at a really, really high level, my Windows 365 machines, they show up exactly, we're actually, so Microsoft's whole goal with this was no net new dashboards, right? That was one of the cool things I heard last week. There are no new dashboards to manage this. So if we go into our devices and endpoint manager, we just have a whole new thing right here called Windows 365. I personally stood up my Active Directory in Azure to support this. And you can see that when I get into this space, I'm presented with a list of the cloud PCs. There is an automated on-prem network connection. You simply build this connection. It runs through checks automatically, and it reruns through these checks every hour. So you're going to see that I've got a warning about Azure AD device sync. As things happen or change in your environment, this will constantly reassess. As things pop up and tell you that there may be a challenge, you're going to get indications as to what may be going wrong. Go back to our devices, we're going to see that we have multiple provisioning policies in our environment. So I have an automated policy that provisions devices at the higher SKU, an automated policy that provisions devices at the lower SKU. They're associated with gallery images, but you can absolutely upload your own custom images here. Once you define your provisioning policies and have all that stuff done, this actually just happens on its own, right? I don't come in here and add things. You see, there's no add, remove button or anything like that. When I have a user that is targeted with a provisioning policy that has an image associated with it, they just get provisioned and they get a machine. These machines do appear in my Active Directory. And one of the mistakes that I made early on, and it's 100% self-inflicted, right? I wrote a blog about this yesterday and published it last night. I tried way too long to sign in to a machine as my enemic user. And what it took me a while to realize, and I have 20 years of Active Directory knowledge in this head, was that's not an AD user. That's an Azure AD only user. It was never going to work. I was trying to force an Azure AD user to authenticate to an on-premises AD machine, right? So there are some considerations that you're going to want to have to, when you're going to want to go through, some ideas about where you're going to want to put Active Directory, how you connect to things. Understand that AAD Connect out of the box configuration is not quite going to get you to the finish line. There's some additional configuration that has to go into that. But once all of that is done, I'm going to have the ability to just target my apps, just as I've always done, right? I've got all these apps that are in here, and I can assign them directly to my to my Windows 365 machines. I can do the same thing with my endpoint security controls, and in fact, in security baselines, there is actually a dedicated Windows 365 security baseline that exists here. All my CA policies exist, all my compliance policies exist, and yes, they work because I did smash a machine a couple days ago just for funsies. I've got my machines that are reporting now into all of my endpoint security, my antivirus. All of these things are now just working, and they're working the way that I want them to. So everything is going on here. All of my management interfaces are all showing up right here. And if I come up to my security space and I look at my device inventory, I'm going to see all of my environment showing up here as well, along with all of my exposure level, all of my risk. So literally everything that we've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 years of all this security enablement and all this productivity enablement, it all just works. We turn it on, we configure exactly as we always have done. And if we do run into a challenge, and actually there are a couple of situations where you might, if we do run into a challenge, we also got right at about the same time, we got filters. And Windows or device filters are in preview, but they are going to make it so that you don't accidentally install your biggest application on your tiniest virtual machines. We can actually come in here and just like we used to do with WMI filters and Active Directory, we can build rules that on the server side preclude certain device types based on attributes at the device from getting the applications, the configurations, all those kind of things that we want. So we can get in and get very, very granular that only when Carl logs into the big dog machine does he get the application set. When he goes on the little machine, he's got to do it all on the web. So there's a ton of kind of configuration and access control in here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Christina, I'm going to pass it back to you for the Q&A.
Yes. No, there's great ones. I'm really excited about this. While I'm pulling this up, I have to give a huge kudos to David and Adrian. I mean, this was literally launched a month ago. So for, you know, for the amount of testing, et cetera, that we've done, it has been amazing to watch the process and like be involved. I'm hoping, well, let me see my screen live, and we will get.
And I'll second that that kudos to Adrian. Adrian has working in his lab environment what I can't get in Microsoft's environment right now. We don't have it set up internally yet. So good for you, Adrian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, seriously, cannot give both of y'all kudos enough. But okay, so let's start. So how to connect to on-prem resources. Adrian, I think we've covered this. You said there's multiple sizes available, pre-canned options from the 1V CPU to 8, 2 GB RAM to 3 PU, etc. Do you want to speak to that, or have we?
So it looks like there were actually two questions hiding in that. The first was any limits for CPU, GPU, and RAM. And there's actually a couple questions in the queue about GPU. And GPU support doesn't exist yet, but I have been told through multiple sources that GPU support will exist in the very near future. As for limits for CPU, RAM, disk, those are all laid out right here. And remember that these are, you know, David was talking about some of the differences between what might guide you toward Windows 365 versus AVD, right? These are pre-canned options decidedly created around making easy buttons for users to get up and be productive in your environment. If you need to get in and very carefully sculpt that, you're probably moving out of the Windows 365 space and more into the AVD space. So yes, there are some limits, but I would expect, as David said, that those limits will change. There will be additional sizes that will be released into this space.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and as for on-prem resources, App Proxy. App Proxy is the bomb diggity, right? It has come so far in the last few years, and we're seeing a massive uptick in adoption for Azure App Proxies. But these are also hybrid Azure AD joined machines. They are actually joined to your Active Directory. So if you can create line of sight, just get it native.
Yeah, awesome. And then so again, and this was an inline answer. So what provisions are available or will be available to facilitate usage by users with poor or intermittent internet access? And so you've spoken to, there's rumors that offline access is on the horizon. However, your home internet is well, yeah, your home internet is awful, but, and yet you still manage to, you still manage to, you're in every meeting and et cetera. Yeah, so next one like that to you. Is there anything, Adrian, is there anything to add to that, or?
Really, I would say if you can watch streaming media at home, you're not going to have a problem.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I mean, our rule of thumb guidance is if you can stream video, then you can stream your PC, depending on the workloads, right? If you've got very heavy workloads on your PC, you're probably gonna need more bandwidth, but generally speaking, that's the rule of thumb.
Okay. And then so when using Windows 365 versus Azure Virtual Desktop, David, you spoke to that really well. And in the follow-up emails that I will send, obviously, if you have more information, we can provide that as well, or I can connect you to David, whether it's Adrian or David, for more resources. We covered the GPU support. How large of a desktop would you suggest for different types of users? Is there a minimum suggestion that would work for pilots?
So I think it's going to depend, everything is right. It depends. I did provision some absolute baseline tiny machines. I will tell you that if you're doing anything that requires a fat Windows 32 app, you're probably not going to have a great time with it. But it's fine for web workloads, right? And there are plenty of first-line worker environments where all you need is a web terminal, and this will work very well for that. My machines are nowhere near the biggest of the lot. And again, you walk into any big box store to buy a computer, and you're going to see an array of everything from the tiniest Chromebook up to the biggest professional machine, right? And the same kind of decisions that might guide you to choose in the big box store are probably going to make you, guide your choices when you're picking the SKUs that are available in Windows 365.
Got it. Okay, awesome. And then, so can it support and or use multiple physical displays? So David, I saw you said up to 16 monitors. If you're running this on a Windows machine, obviously it won't work on an Android phone, for example. Is obviously, again, all these questions come in anonymously, but to the person that asked, we have follow-up answers if you need more information. But is there anything more between Adrian and David that you'd like to speak to on that specific question? Like, do you have any more follow-up, or is that kind of a standard?
No, actually, I lost my video because I was trying to get this to run on 2 monitors. I love testing real time, right? So yeah, that's what threw my Teams into a hidden desktop. So anyway.
Okay. So how would an IT support person remote into a user's cloud PC to help with various things? So David, I know you said if you're using Windows 365 Enterprise, you would use standard desktop support tools, no difference than a machine that's sitting in a remote office. Is there any follow-up or anything that you'd like to add to that? Or
no, I mean, it really is just, it is just a machine, right? As long as you've got some kind of tool that allows you to remote access into it, just like if the machine was, on a different floor of the same building, you can connect to it that way. You can connect to it in the cloud. It's the same thing.
I would say you probably even have more options in this case, because now you could connect to it inside the actual machine itself, or you can connect to the user's physical device, whatever it is that they're using to gain access to it. And incidentally, because all of the Intune stuff allows me to connect it to the Microsoft Store for Business, one of the things that exists out there is like remote support tools, and I can assign those remote support tools as a deployed application, and it just gets pushed to the machine by virtue of it synchronizing to my endpoint manager. So I don't know if anybody noticed, but I have LogMeIn123 as a deployed app in that environment, specifically to help with that kind of scenario.
Okay. Next one. So how do video calls in Teams work over the cloud PC? And David, you said Teams audio video redirection, just like an Azure Virtual Desktop. So is that just kind of standard practice, or do you have any tips or?
No, I mean, it simply redirects your video, redirects your, your headset or whatever. And I mean, that's been used in Azure Virtual Desktop for a little while. It's the same principle.
Okay. So is there a separate nonprofit price list? Currently, so there's no EDU or NPO reduced pricing available. That would be David, you can speak more to that, or that's a follow-up with one of our account executives, I think, in terms of pricing, because I know literally pricing was released 2 weeks ago. So I know, we're all learning this at the same time, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally all I know. That doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means it's not available yet.
Got it. Can Synergy help me pilot this? Absolutely. We have the team. We got you. We can absolutely help you pilot this. We have, and I'll gonna get to this in my follow up. We have a Windows 365 quick start engagement that so we're providing clients with 5 seats of Windows 365 for 30 days to pilot this. So whether it's you respond to me or a sales executive, your account executive, we can absolutely help you get started with that. You jump started me. That was supposed to be my ending. I still have 2 more questions. All right, there were new ones. Is there an ETA for nonprofit pricing, David? That would be.
I have no ETA on that. Literally, I'm looking at the FAQs for our internal pricing stuff, and what I typed in there is exactly what it said. Currently, no EDU, nonprofit pricing available. That's all.
So, and last question: is this service going to be available for non-business personal deployment? I guess that would fall into this, the same bracket as the previous, the nonprofit, where just your Microsoft is still building out.
Well, I mean, you can go out to Windows365.com and provision a machine using the Windows 365 business license, right? And you can have a machine up and running in a few minutes. Yeah, I mean, there's no difference in pricing if you're a business or just a standard human, right? But
Okay.
But you can get it up and running that easy.
Awesome. Well, that was the last. That was a great Q&A, honestly. And I know this was such a huge topic to cover. And again, I have to give major kudos to Adrian, you and David for deploying and like covering this topic in such a short amount of time for this webinar. But to everyone else, thank you so much for attending today. You will receive a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar by tomorrow. There's also a second part in the series to this webinar, Thursday, September 23rd. You will receive a link to that as well. And so as this webinar covered the, overview of intro to what the technology is and how to use it, we're following up with more of an admin, the back end, like how do you actually deploy it, how do you manage it, etc. So you can look forward to that in September, but you'll receive a recording to this by tomorrow as well. And the recording, like I said, the recording and the registration page for the one next month. In the future, please be sure to keep up with us on social or check out our events page on our website to keep up for more upcoming webinars. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great Q&A. I think we had great conversation. Adrian and David, I can't thank you enough again for how much work y'all put into this. I know we're really excited about it. And to anyone interested in deploying this or interested, we have a Windows 365 quick start engagement that, like I said, will include 5 seats of Windows 365 for free for 30 days. If you would like to trial it within your organization, you can reach out to Dan Finn. So he's you can see his email at the bottom of the slide, or as well as reply to me or Adrian. You've seen our emails in the previous emails and/or slides, and we can get you started. But again, thank you, everyone.